Oh, hi. I'm Andrew, faculty member at Grand Valley State University. I teach primarily online graduate educational technology courses, which I've been doing since 2008. Over the years, I've experimented with various tools, techniques, and methods, drawing on published research as well as work of others. I hope this session provides helpful ideas for you and for those who attend the symposium. Welcome to session 2 on Wednesday, the 14th, starting at 30 a.m., where we will focus on evidence-based recommendations for online course design layouts. This session uses peer review along with experience teaching online to formulate and share recommended practices for course layout design for educators. We begin with some background on my expertise and typical audience of students. I teach primarily graduate students who are adult learners, and I treat them as such. I apply adult learning theory to my instruction and assessment practices, as well as drawing on what has proven effective in my teaching. I also have conducted research on our program and students, which further informs my technique.
I find the Quality Course Framework from the University to be an excellent framework for designing online education. As indicated on the slide, the process includes a typical instructional design and development approach, incorporating digital and human resources throughout. These items should look familiar to you if institutions have provided or adopted a framework or structure for faculty support for online instruction. At the center of this approach are the learning goals and objectives for whatever subjects and topics you are teaching. In this session, we will primarily focus on course organization, instructional activities, course content, media, and materials. Another popular standard for evaluating online instructional quality comes from Quality Matters. Grand Valley has adopted a modified version of this instrument for peer review of faculty teaching in online or blended settings. I provide an example of a modified instrument we use as part of our annual peer review process. With each item in the rubric are areas for narrative comments and suggestions for possible improvements. Additional comments are included in this sample at the bottom of the form. Over the years, faculty have developed, tested, and promoted various techniques, styles, and approaches to create accessible course designs and layouts that are easy to navigate and have structural integrity. One example comes from Jason Rode, who describes 4 key aspects of course design: goals and objectives, content presentation, engagement, and technology use. For the purposes of this, we will primarily focus on content presentation under course design and items under learning support. For example, Rode recommends including an orientation to the course that draws attention to accessibility and accommodations for all students. Simon then argues any online or blended course should be organized around units, modules, or topics. Units will be broken down into subdivisions, while a module is a distinct, discrete unit of instruction. Topics often represent those in a book outline or table of content. Using Carnegie units in a 3-credit online course are expected to spend around 24 hours a week learning. Adopting models for course organization will hopefully help students navigate your course and improve their success. Oklahoma University suggests the following tips when designing your course layout: provide a logical, consistent order, include directions for weekly requirements, and ensure all media materials are accessible and support universal design for learning. We will return to some of these topics again later in this presentation. Some years ago, I had the opportunity to explore and examine course layout on Blackboard from a variety of sources. I searched for different layouts or designs from various subjects and educational levels. Doing so allowed me to analyze and characterize course formats into common layouts. For example, this course layout uses a unit focus with common to organize below general information. The course designs in Blackboard share a set of navigational tools on the left-hand side of the screen in red,
Let me
with
take
the right-hand
a
side
refresh here. We stopped at 452. And let me check to see if it's the player.
These course designs in Blackboard share a set of navigation on the left-hand side of the screen indicated right, with the right-hand side containing information about each element or tool selected. Sample bound focused on human-centered design, use and include the scattered or random list of tools for navigation, which make it challenging for students to access requirements. This design includes readings, discussions, and activities or assignments for each unit. A to-do list. Providing students with a list of items required may seem an oversimplification, but many faculty members adopted this approach.
Andy, do you want to talk it through and we can just run the PowerPoint?
Kelly?
Yep.
I also posted the MP4 in the shared folder. I don't know if it's the
Okay.
video from Vimeo that's slowing it down and breaking up the audio or something else.
Do you want us to
Which
run
clip is
without
it?
audio and you talk it?
I really don't, because I don't have the script handy for everything I
Oh, I
said.
understand.
Yeah. In response to the other question, yeah, it should be out there with my name and P2 as S2.
S2, I see it and it's
Including
playing the MP4 and it's having the same audio issue. So it looks like it was recorded that way.
the original course design in Blackboard was random and unorganized, which is clear from
Even the MP4 in the Google Drive, which is what I'm playing.
Okay. Let's just try muting the audio and I'll try to talk through these slides.
Yeah, great. Let's do that best you can. Thank you
Okay.
for being flexible.
Is there a specific spot you wanted me to start?
Why don't you go back to where I talk about the samples that I'm describing. It's a couple slides back. That's fine. Perfect. So
I
as
believe
I
the
said,
video's playing.
yeah, this is a course categories for Jason Broad. The areas that I'm focused on, as I said in the presentation, are content and the action. Here's the assignment, and it talks about the ways in which people structure their courses online. These are fairly standard. Next slide. Oh, so this talks about how any design for an online course should have consistent logical order. Directions for assignments are very important. Where things are located, I'll talk about later. Obviously, a clear description of the syllabus, assignment, the schedule, and then focusing on applying UDL principles when you're creating instruction. This example talks about what I consider to be a fairly standard format, where you have the navigation window on the left with dividers between the major sections, and then you have the content on the right. Since we use Blackboard, this is kind of the structure we're forced to use. But I do find it's nicely structured if you use the left-hand side and provide dividers between your navigationals. Yeah, the presentation itself is also available in the shared folder. So as I started looking at people's designs, I started to notice there were some common themes. For example, this is a course on human-centered design, which I thought was kind of strange, because all of the items on the left are like randomly listed, you know, coursework, discussions, grades. They seem to just be a random list of all the possible tools you could use in this course. And I think I mentioned this in the video. In conversation with students and collecting feedback, some students might find this hard to follow or hard to navigate. I will say that this is another design in the sense that it has within the main section 3 different options. This one here uses a module approach. A lot of faculty members love the module. I'm not a big fan of it, but I understand it's a nice way to conceptualize instruction and assessment. But the thing I like about this design is you can see there's some groupings, logical groupings of navigation tools on the left, syllabus, assignments, etc. And then obviously a segment for each unit, and each unit can have multiple items in it with a module. You can have instruction, you can have video, you can even have discussions. This one here, I think, again, fairly simple. This is a textbook chapter-based course. So you have the major headings on the top. Again, hand side navigation window provides some clarity, some structure. And in this case, there's videos, there's assignments, there's activities. So for those of you who are using a textbook and chapter, this might be a really valid approach to use in terms of organization. And then this one is, again, kind of a random listing. Not a lot of helpful information on the left, basically just a list of the tools which you can click on. And again, one of the things I try to focus on when I design my own layout is how to minimize students clicking between links, because that can be distracting and complicated. This one is my traditional old, this is where I started, right, 10 years ago. And I have to admit, it's totally random. It's totally just like, here's a bunch of stuff on the left. I don't really know how it can be characterized or categorized. If you click on one of these, you get a window that opens up with additional links, some of which take you to more parts of the Blackboard course. And I think this comes to the issue of cognitive effort on the part of students to navigate around in our courses. You know, each of us maybe has a different designed layout. That's a challenge because students, as they move between different courses, are forced to deal and navigate through different complex layouts. So I draw primarily on Wang, Cutler, and Brighton. They talk about designing with 7 particular goals: direct access to those items that are used common. Again, simple, meaningful, logical organization. Try to use particular language for menus, items, and files. One of the questions is, how do you locate a link in a document? You know, the traditional way is an underlined word. That could be the way you do it, but others may. This key, number 5, is maintain only 3 levels of navigation if possible. So that means starting from the main menu, if I click on an option on the left, I get a page. That's my second link. I click on that and it takes me either direct to the document or to a series of documents which I choose from. The other thing to consider is use of color, contrast, etc. Apparently I can't talk as well as I do if I don't have a script. This shows an example that Wang, Cutler, and Brighton provide, which has all of the elements of their design recommendations. The start here, the course documents, the support, the frequently used, the overview, and the resources provided. So applying their approach to my revised course design, you can see I have decided to break up the components for navigation into logical sections: course information, basic information, syllabus, schedule, guidelines, etc. on the top. I include a video where things are located, which I'll talk about in a second. A scrolling window of weekly activities. I like this because once every week, that window changes. You have last week, you have this week, and you have next week. I have a 3-week window within which students can complete activities and assignments. And then obviously the frequently used tools, discussion board, blog, chats, those are all below. And then at the very bottom, direct access to items like my information, email, grades, etc. So if a student were to click on one of the items on the left-hand side, so example, in this case, week 12 activities, that opens up another page with first of all, a description of each week. And I've started to include a checklist, which I'll talk about in a second. Readings or discussions, instructional media, hypertext, links. So again, if a student clicks on the left, clicks on one of these items, they go directly to that tool. So they go to the discussion board. Here's the forum, they post. Some overall recommendations, and I've touched on these in the other slides. Providing multiple entry points provides flexibility. Provide a simple, intuitive interface. Provide a flexible window, if you can, for task or assignment completion and participation. And then, like I say, at the bottom, I've recently adopted a topical focus, a weekly activity. One of my colleagues does this and finds that it's very helpful. So I've adapted that as well. So the last thing I want to talk about is the accessibility option. Certainly, you're going to have different tools. We use Ally, so we can generate a report, a graph of how accessible our materials are. Certainly, I go through this. If I see things that I fix them, and I try to get a score that is pretty high. In this case, 90% is what I think acceptable. But we need to understand that in order to provide accessible materials for our students, we need to make sure we have all those things. And then finally, I create a video screencast where I walk students through where things are located online. I basically show them in the video, here's where this is, here's where you submit, here's the information on participation, here's where the session. We use Camtasia or Panopto at Grand Valley, so we screen capture, and then this is just a screenshot of the video where I walk students through the various areas, highlighting them in different colors. It's me saying thank you. Are there any questions? So I guess at this point, I'll stop talking. We'll open it to questions. Angie, are you going to share
I have
questions?
a couple of questions. Sorry.
Yep, that's okay.
When I re-entered, I got muted and then I didn't unmute, so I apologize. Mainly, they are around the topic that you mentioned way back at the beginning about module design and how you didn't prefer that. So Sue Collins asked, what are your concerns about module designed courses?
Okay. Again, some of my colleagues rave about modules. I think they're a good tool for building a complete set of instruction materials with assignments. As a coherent unit, I like the idea. We use, as I say, Blackboard. It makes you go through step by step. It's difficult to navigate in and out. Once you start something, I think you have to finish it. If you have an end of activity event, it's not going to let you go on to the next thing. So it's kind of forcing a sequential start to end process that I find a little bit challenging. Again, I understand the benefits. If you want students to just stick to a particular thing and go through beginning to end, it's a great tool. As I said in the beginning, my students are more adult professionals. I like to give them the flexibility, not force them to go through something from start to finish without the option to try something else. Hopefully that's helpful.
I would just open that up because there were several people who chimed in with comments and questions concerning that same issue. So if anyone would like to say anything here or ask a follow-up question, please feel free to turn on your mic or post it in the chat.
Can I ask a question following on from that?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Davis. Thank you, Angie. Thank you very much. This is something I'm working on right now for a summer course that's has to be online, and I'm looking forward to it. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is that modules are one of the comments says they're like big baskets that you put pages into. But then the other thing you said that is like the modules are a bit more structured in terms of time and order. So like you have to go through this way and you might not be able to see what's gone before or what will come up later. Is that correct?
Well, first, I'm not an expert on modules. I have tried using them myself. In trying to use them, it seemed to me, and maybe I just didn't understand how they work, that there was a little bit of rigidity in terms of the sequence that students have to follow. And the idea of going through to completion before you can go to the next module is something that I had found to be constraining for me.
Okay. That that's helpful. I mean, I think the template that UM Dearborn has been distributing, I think, has a slight preference for pages anyway. So I'm trying to get on board with that. But thank you. I'll let other people follow up. Thank you.
That are showing up in the chat, the fact that Canvas modules and Blackboard modules are very different as far as functionality. So depending on what LMS you're using, that could be swaying you one way or the other with modules. And it looks like, Tom, would you like to chime in here?
I was about to, but you said pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I hadn't been keeping up with the chat there, but I was just kind of wondering that perhaps, you know, the actual particular style of Blackboard's modules may have led to that choice for you, as opposed to maybe they're pretty, even though you can force sequential order in Canvas modules. I've been in both, and I kind of tend to thought that like, I think Blackboard's discussion board is better than Canvas's, but I think the module tool in Canvas is better than Blackboard's. They kind of hobbled their way into having learning modules in the first place.
And I would be the first to say that my experience has been exclusively with Blackboard, and I don't find it to be totally supportive of what I'd like to do. Obviously, as an instructional designer, there are things I'd like to do that are hard to do or maybe impossible to do. Certainly, you know, and the balance here is how much time am I willing to spend to learn about the tool when I could be spending that time, you know, designing better courses.
And we do have a plug for a tech session later this afternoon. So if you have more questions around modules and groups, Pamela will be having that. So another question that came up was, Dr. Topper, you mentioned GarageBand, and Chris is interested if you have a chance to elaborate on your use of GarageBand.
I mentioned GarageBand as an alternative to whatever else you might have. I use Audacity for my audio, and just picked the tool, decided to learn to use it, and now I've been using it for many years. So what I do is I create a screencast. We have Camtasia, but there are screencast tools out there for free. I assume they all kind of do the same thing. So what I do is I create a script for my voice, and then I go through and time the sessions that I'm using and try to walk through the screencast directing to each of the elements. But the bottom line is I create a video, an MP4, which is me showing students directly through the screencast where everything is and talking about assignments and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that helps a little.
Chris, do you have any follow-up questions about GarageBand? Looks like that answer.
I've used GarageBand a bit for instruments, for playing guitar, but I've never thought about it in terms of using it for in places, say Kaltura or other things, like to prepare a lesson, to prepare a video.
Yeah, it's funny. I think many of us, you know, we grew up with a television. We didn't grow up with interactive TV or the ability to create our own media. And so I have worked really hard to try to learn about how to use video, media, audio, and text in combination. So for example, if I'm going to share a presentation with my students, I make sure that there is a transcript There is audio if you want it, but I don't force it on you. So this kind of comes back to the idea of using media to allow for flexibility in students. Those who prefer the transcript, for example, have it, but it's not forced on them. Those who prefer the audio can use it if they want. Those who don't can just go through the presentation in PowerPoint.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much.
And it looks like Pamela had a question or a concern about color and the use of color and how that raises accessibility issues. So the wondering was, how else can we design around color? Because that was mentioned quite a bit in the presentation.
Right, I did talk about color, and again, it's one of those things that we have to be careful about. Certainly, there are students who are colorblind who are going to be challenged to see the things we see. We take for granted that they can see what we see. So red, for example, or yellow. I try to limit the colors to particular purposes. Like in my schedule, if there's an assignment, I will typically put it in yellow, or I mean red, to indicate that this is something important. Certainly the screen readers are going to take that. And I also make sure that I have alternate text for visually impaired students so they can hear my voice say, you know, this is an assignment or whatever. The assignment is due on this date. I primarily play around more with in italics, bold, and underline because I find these to be widely overused. Like I say, one of the things I wondered about when I first started thinking about was the underlined text. You know, in most web-based documents, an underlined text is a link. And so students may have already a preconceived notion of an underline as a way to get to something else. And that's not always the case. Again, with bold, I try to use bold sparingly to highlight a particular word or sequence that I want students to pay attention to and to recall, if you will, later on. This is kind of like the key idea. In terms of italics, again, I think that's one of those things that is personal preference. But what I'm encouraging us all to do is to consider our students, and our students may not have the same preferences and needs and abilities that we have. And so use of color or underline or bold should be questioned by all of us to make sure that we're providing an interface that is accessible to everyone.
So we have about 2 minutes left before you have the option to stay here for more of the Q&A, or head over to the tech breakout session. So that link is going to be posted. Pamela, do you have any follow-up questions with the use of color or bold, italics, underline that you would like to pose?
I do see a question that says, or a comment that says, GarageBand is only screencasting, not the ability to put your face on it. Yeah, I don't put my face in my presentations. I generally try to avoid including my face and stuff if I can. So I don't, you know, again, I basically use it to capture navigation on the screen in the website, Blackboard, and then I attach audio to the slides. Another thing I'd like to solicit is other people's experiences with some of these things. Certainly, I'm not the expert on user interface design. I don't have that degree. So if any of you have recommendations or things that you've learned or you'd like to share, I would love to hear those as well.
Yeah, Pamela, I understand what you're saying. I appreciate that. Like I say, in Blackboard, we have the ability to post an icon or a small picture of our face. And I use that to, as you say, to kind of give people a sense of what I look like. I also, in a different session I'm going to cover tomorrow, talk about using synchronous chat to develop a sense of connectedness or social presence, because I think one of the points you're getting at is how do we get to know each other when we're not face to face? To tell people, traditional classroom, there's a lot of stuff that happens before class, during the break, and after class where people get to know each other, and that piece is absent unless we accommodate people's interests somehow in an online course. So I totally agree that having people's faces is important in that sense.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make when laying out their class?
Wow. That could be a whole hour talk right there. It's funny. I think that many of us take for granted that the way we see things visually is the way everybody sees them. So, so this issue of color, layout, organization, structure, for example, Wang et al. Talk about simple, intuitive design. What does that mean? Again, I don't have a degree in design science, but I do know that there are some things that the literature says have been shown to be effective for making it easier for students to navigate and to locate. I definitely pay attention to student comments in my evaluations about how my course is organized. And I welcome suggestions from students, from colleagues, anybody, for things to consider. But like I say, my approach, my design has changed over the 20 years I've been teaching online based on experience, but also on, like I say, research. I think there's research that can help us design better, more effective formats and layouts for our courses.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add to that, and also we have people who know those things who work with. The tech support people. Some of them have some of that background, and so drawing on those people for help, especially in terms of how our course looks visually. I think having colleagues who evaluate us, look at our structure, and provide substantive comments, recommendations, questions. Because again, my goal is to craft a visual representation of the structure of my course so that students can easily get what they need, and that's not another obstacle for them for success.
So follow up to that, you mentioned that you take your student feedback into consideration. And I know as soon as you said that, the number one thing that pops into my head is how the heck do you get student feedback? Because that is kind of hard to pull out of students. So I don't know if you had success and failure that you can talk about, some questions that draw out good feedback better than others as far as course design.
Sure. We have a standard form. We use something created by our statistics department. So it provides a variety of ratings on student engagement, challenge, all that kind of stuff. One of the questions for an online course is, how would you rate the overall organization of it's called a website, which I find annoying. Websites are from about 20 years ago, but it's basically asking students to comment on the organization of the course. And so and it's a qualitative response. It's not a 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. It's a you respond. And so students have an opportunity when we ask that question to say, I found it complicated or confusing. I had trouble finding things I needed to do, or
you know, I found that it was fairly clear, you know, or it's different from other teachers or educators I've had, but I was able to, through the video, the screencast, you know, figure out where things were. The other thing that I'll say is one of the things I do when I'm teaching students who are not familiar with my layout is I strongly recommend they watch the video at the beginning of the term. Now, I can't force them to do that, but I can also go into Blackboard and see how many of them have actually looked at it. And so if I do have a student who is struggling and complaining about the layout of my structure, I can follow up with them individually and say, well, you know, I've got this video out here. You could, you know, take advantage of that, and that might help you. And a follow up on that, we are allowed to add questions of our own to this, to the instrument we use for course evaluations. So if I wanted maybe to see more particularly how people rated the interface in terms of, you know, easy or hard or whatever, I can add a couple questions at the end of the course evaluation and gather that data and use it to improve.
Do you make adjustments every semester? Is there enough feedback every semester, or is it something that happens more occasionally?
I think that's, I generally read pretty critically what students say about the course. I also gather both numerical data and qualitative data that I look at about every year. Sometimes there are courses that are especially challenging for students. If they're used to, for example, a particular layout and structure in all of their courses, then mine is a challenge because it's different from what they're used to. Likewise, if my colleagues use a different approach, again, there can be that issue. So part of it is just discerning why there was confusion or why there was trouble navigating or finding things. The other side of that, though, is, you know, I'm not gonna spend all of my time trying to create a perfect visual representation. I'm gonna draw on my experiences. If I think there's a legitimate argument for a change, i.e., you know, providing the screencast or providing a description of the layout or asking students to share their experiences in an online class, then I tend to take that advice and try it.
So as a faculty member who it sounds like has spent considerable time really evaluating your course design for online, with other faculty who maybe don't have as much time but are still doing online, have you all over at Grand Valley found any really good structures for sharing information about design, or just sharing your research with your colleagues in a good way that you could maybe share with us?
Sure. There's a couple of mechanisms Grand Valley has available. One, they have these professional learning communities, many of which are focused on the challenges of teaching online. Certainly over the last 2 months, I got to believe a lot of my colleagues have been participating in some of those learning communities because they've never considered teaching online, and now that's what they do. But I also take the opportunity at Grand Valley as a tenured faculty member. I still have to have a colleague evaluate or review my course once a year. And we use Quality Matters, a modified Quality Matters instrument. So whenever a faculty member, and I usually ask people who, you know, are new to the university or to the college, because I find that they provide a kind of a fresh perspective. And one of the things I ask them to pay attention to is how the organization of the course, the layout of the course, the design of the course, how they found it, as a faculty member, and some of these people are teaching their courses online as well. And so I try to draw from 3 sources. Obviously, I think the PLCs are helpful. Certainly, as I said before, student feedback is helpful. And then I look also to peers for their feedback. Having a conversation with a new colleague about why my course is laid out the way it is can be really informative for both of us.
Can you speak a little bit about how the PLCs were formed, maybe a little bit about the structure of them, how they decide on topics, how often they meet, any of that information?
Sure. We have, like I think most universities do, a faculty teaching and learning center, which traditionally has provided professional development training for faculty. And I think that is where most of these come from. There's grant funds that people can apply for to provide food and incentives for people to participate. A faculty member or a collection of faculty members would submit a proposal for a grant to form a PLC around the challenges of teaching online, or more specifically, what are effective practices we have developed or observed for facilitating student engagement online. That would be much more narrow. So what happens is faculty members typically will submit a proposal or be asked to join a PLC. I've been part of many PLCs over the years, some of them looking at what is excellent teaching at the college level, where we read books and we talk about issues, our experiences. But certainly there's a genre that I consider to be really helpful, which are, kind of online teaching PLCs, and they can be 3 to 7 or 8 people. Sometimes they will include staff members with expertise. Obviously, our e-learning group is key to doing some of the things that that help us. So I think Grand Valley does a decent job of providing a variety of resources for faculty. Certainly, you have to take the time to participate. But again, if you're, and I find that a lot of times when I participate, I may not learn much, but I do appreciate the opportunity to share with others. How are other people doing similar learning community things in their institutions?
I'm going to give anyone in the audience just a minute to speak up if you want to share how you all do PLCs in your area.
Hi, this is Lisa. PLCs we're referring as teaching circles at West Shore Community College. We are the 3rd smallest college in the state of Michigan, so we've been doing to encourage teaching circles is in a semester, you could create a teaching circle, or a whole division could create a teaching circle, and we're using them as drill down concepts. And how that is, we actually may focus on one specific thing in a class, and our peers or our colleagues do the evaluation. So in that semester, our evaluation, our peer would, based on the work we did during that teaching circle. Did my audio work?
It was breaking out a little bit, but I think I got the gist of it. I was typing a little bit. So just to follow up to the teaching circles, how frequently do you have the opportunity to form those? How many do you usually participate in? What have you kind of seen come from those?
So I could participate in one larger one, which means we're going to do a little more intensive drilling down, bring some experts in, So what I was involved in last year was accommodations in syllabi. So we, as a whole occupational division, decided and worked on what actually should be in our syllabi. How should we deliver it face to face? How should it be delivered online? And so we brought in several key components of research. Each of us kind of took little. You almost become your own ad hoc committee because you do a section of research, and then we bring them back together. And I want to say each semester we probably met 3 or 4 times. Not every time was with food. As it was mentioned a minute ago, we don't have that larger budget, but sometimes it would be a morning one just with coffee, and we would break up and we would share all of our information prior to our face-to-face meeting so that we could all review each other's research and then have constructive conversations. I wonder if, Angie, it would help if I stop my video, if my audio would be better. Hold on. Hopefully this is better if you have questions.
Yeah, that definitely did help with the audio.
Any other questions I could help with on how we're doing the teaching circles?
I was pausing to see if anyone else would jump in with questions. I feel like I'm taking over the
No,
questioning.
That's okay. I do have a question about how do you get faculty and members to participate in the circles? I mean, it seems like it's a commitment of time and energy. And certainly I know, everybody's busy, taking a full load, doing whatever service. How do you encourage faculty to participate?
So some of the carrot is you're being reviewed by a colleague or a peer in lieu of your dean. Some of that's a carrot. It also occasionally, if you chair a team, you can, per our contract, we have to participate in 2 on-campus teams, is how we refer to them. And you can, if you chair an all-year teaching circle, you actually can dismiss yourself participating in one of the teams. So it's not you, so you're actually kind of giving a little bit of your time. You're not having to double dip your time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, certainly if you have a requirement for service, you're providing service to your institution by facilitating these learning groups.
All teaching circles are accountable to our academic team. And so we actually have to give measurable outcomes and report back in conclusion.
And I'll just follow up from Grand Valley on our PLCs. If you propose a PLC, you have to, at the end of the year, provide some evidence, whatever that looks like, of the impact on people's teaching. It could be a note from participating faculty that says, I learned so many great ideas from this and I'm implementing them. So there is, I think, that expectation that if you're going to have these groups, there should be some measurable outcome in terms of teaching.
So my original question around the PLC actually stems from the fact that in your presentation, Dr. Topper, you had several different designs, and some of them were yours as you've progressed, but some of them look like they were from other areas. And I am always kind of looking for designs so I can kind of see what I like, what I don't like, and then steal it. And not everyone is willing to share. So I was kind of wondering how you access so many different types of designs, how you find those, how you get those.
Yeah, I went to our e-learning group and I said, I know you've seen a lot of designs over the years, and some of the people who were manning the group have been through our either master's degree or graduate certificate, so they've been former students. So gracious enough to provide me with some samples of faculty at Grand Valley who have designed courses. I mean, as part of the first, at Grand Valley, if you're going to teach online, you have to complete a workshop. And so, so for those folks who have done it the first time or have done it many times, I was provided with a collection of possible layouts.
So that a statement you just made there about in order to teach online, you have to complete a workshop. What is happening now due to COVID and everyone taught online? How is Grand Valley planning on getting those reins back, or are they after this?
Yeah, I think unfortunately the horse has left the barn, to use that metaphor. Yes, in the past, any course that was going to be taught either hybrid or online, the faculty, the instructor of record had to have completed a workshop through our e-learning, Foundations of Online Course Development, I think it's called. Certainly, if you have credentials, i.e. experiences, or you've got a degree in instructional design, you can be exempt from that requirement. But when the COVID-19 thing hit, I think everybody realized that there was no way about half of our faculty who aren't teaching online, maybe higher than that, could all go through this required training in a short period of time. So that restriction was lifted. And certainly that raises some really interesting questions about the quality of our online instruction. And certainly it raises questions about faculty and their willingness and ability to really adapt to the online environment.
So
I will say one follow-up thing. All the course evaluations for the winter term were canceled.
That's pretty huge. So it looks like we have about 1 minute left in our session. And after that, we will be breaking for lunch. Lunch is a discussion of keeping students connected that will be hosted by Jeremy Bond. So lunch is also a time to unmute and to have your videos on if you're going to be present. Otherwise, you can keep your mic muted and keep your video off if you're going to be going in and out. But I just want to thank you, Dr. Topper, for hosting the session and the question and answer. And I have to give a plug because I sat many of your courses and I loved them, and I ran into telling other professors, well, this isn't the way that Dr. Topper does it. So I had that end of things.
I have to say,
I have no response to that.
I haven't heard Andrew say that, but the number of times that I've heard Kelly say that as well. Yeah, if I had $1 for every time I hear that, my retirement account might be in decent shape even with the virus.
Thanks to everybody for participating, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Andy. And at this point, I'm going to turn it off to Jeremy. I'm going to step out and go into the other session. There were some technical things with one of the with Kelly, as far as she was doing the facilitation, just to make sure that they know the link to get back, because she had some tech issues on her end. So I'm going to jump out and come back in. But it's all you, Jeremy.
All right. Well, good luck resolving the tech issues in the other session. As I was listening to your session, the tail end of it, Dr. Topper, I was warned by Zoom multiple times that my connection is unstable. So please, if anyone notices a problem with audio, I'm happy to turn my video back off. Quite frankly, the cell so if it starts to degrade and when getting me in the chat, that would be wonderful. It's good to be back. I opened a session yesterday. Both of you I've not had a chance to speak with or meet on an occasion. Mentioned. My name is Jeremy Bond. Excuse me. I'm from Central Michigan University, or rather with Central Michigan University, where I've been working for the last, I'm in my 22nd year, in fact. My anniversary was just this past Mother's Day. I'm currently Director of Instructional Development there. Looks like audio is in and out. Thank you, Angie. Let's kill video for a bit and see if that helps. When I killed my video, it hit all of yours from me. So I'll stay in and we'll see what happens. But so I've been at CMU for 22 years, currently Director of Instructional Development. Prior to that, I was Director of e-learning. Prior to that, I managed our LMS team. Prior to that, I was what they called an online course coordinator many years ago. Over that period of time, I've also taught concurrently at Mid-Michigan College, formerly Mid-Michigan Community College, as well. Teaching experience. I think I lost you all together. Maybe you can get in another and back.
Pretty hard.
I don't see anyone anymore at this point, and hopefully you can still hear me.
Your audio is cutting out pretty hard.